Beautiful day today. Beautiful day in New York today. Beautiful evening in New York today, actually. I'm assuming it's a beautiful day in Melbourne, Australia as well. Welcome, everyone, to the Watto Business Podcast. I hope you've got your 3D glasses on because today is going to be an interesting one. We've got Zac Duff of JigSpace, a platform that allows teams to create 3D presentations. Zac, thank you for joining us.
No worries, mate. Really excited to be here. And it's actually, I'm in Tasmania right now. So Melbourne is about 45 minutes flight that way over a body of water. So yeah.
Tasmania is an island south of the mainland, Australia, right? So it's not even part, it's not a part of mainland Australia.
Yeah, exactly. We call the mainland is what we call like the large body of Australia, and that gets us ridiculed widely around the country. But it's it's a great place. Actually, the Tasmanian Devil, the character, is it Looney Tunes? Yeah. So that's, or Disney, whoever made it. That's from this state. Yeah, so it's like an animal that's only in Tasmania.
Based on a true story.
Yeah. Facts.
Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us. You've got a really interesting product, really cool story, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your background. Did you grow up in Tasmania?
Yeah, so I'm from a town with 30 people. So a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, like far northeast Tassie, dairy country. That's it pretty much. And my dad started a computer business in the northeast of Tasmania in the 90s, which is, if you're thinking about like markets and total addressable market, there's not a huge one there. So it was the first lesson in market sizing. But and my mum is an artist, like a well-known fine artist. So they're kind of that combination of tech and art pushed me towards video games as a thing. And I spent a lot of my time, as a kid making video games. I think my first one I made when I was about 11 and just started programming 3D games. So it's been something I've been doing for ages, forever.
What was the video game that you created?
The very first one that I made was it was just kind of an environment where you'd run around this terrible third person thing, but it was running around this beautiful green field with butterflies and lakes and this cool little cabin you could go into. It was just it was a little world that I made. It was really interesting looking back at it, the things that I learned in programming at that time. It was like, I'd have a problem where I just wanted to make a ridge around the edge of my world, and I was like having to move each edge point, and like it was just terrible code. And then I realized I could do loops and I could just run through the same thing in a smaller block of code. It was like those kind of moments, looking back on it, is the learning based on a problem, going, okay, I can get around this by learning a thing. And that's just probably you could map out my entire career based on that, like just hacking around to get something working because I got a big idea in my head.
Now, how did you, well, let's take a step back. The computer business that your dad started, what was it? What did he do? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so his first computer business was called PC Australia, and it was a PC, like an IT shop, like it'd sell computers here. In fact, the very building that I'm in now, my office in Launceston, is where he had his office in the 80s and 90s, just down the hall. So there's a heap of memories attached to this place. But it was, this computer business, and that went under with the IBM crash because he was selling primarily IBM hardware, and the IBM crash happened, and then a couple of years later the knock-on was for a lot of the small retailers of IBM PCs, they went under, and his was one of them. Then we moved out into the middle of nowhere, Tassie, into this little country town, and he started a web design business in the 90s, which is kind of really cutting edge. And he ran also the the online access centers around Tasmania. When they were first setting up the internet, they put it into libraries and people could go into a library and use it. And he ran that in the northeast of Tasmania. So he's kind of I've always been around technology and computers from his side. And he's run various small businesses over the years. I've worked at one of them, worked for him. Like, he actually paid me a wage at one point to do 3D modeling. But yeah, it was kind of cool to see. He started all these businesses. He ended up working at a bank because it was a reliable income. But he was, he just started all of these businesses, and seeing that, he'd just pick something up and he'd go, right, I'm going to try something new and do that. It was really, really cool. But on my mum's side, as an artist, she has she's like a well-known artist. She sells paintings all over the world. She tours around the world doing things. But she also has an art academy here in Launceston, in the city. And it's an institution now. It's been here for like 20 years, and it's really well known. So she's also runs her own business. I think, where we all start our own things. I've got 7 siblings, and half of them have started their own businesses. So I think we're just all terrible employees.
Wow. Or brilliant creators, entrepreneurs, founders. Your mom sells paintings all over the world. So was she classically trained? What's her background? How did she get into this? So it's really interesting that both of your parents are, in a way, entrepreneurial and very creative in their own right.
Yeah, she's self-trained. So she had 8 kids, which took up a chunk of time. And then she decided probably this would be early 90s or maybe mid 90s to take up painting. And she'd always been interested in done some painting, but then really got stuck into it and started to teach herself, read a lot about Rembrandt, Vermeer, the old masters, and just practiced everything and just kept painting. And now she's really, really good and a fine artist. So it's all landscapes and portraits and like traditional fine art, really, really beautiful stuff, but all self-taught. Dad was the same, largely self-taught with a lot of the things that he did. He ended up getting a computer science degree, but that was years after he'd done a lot of this stuff. So
to start a web design company or in the 90s would have to be totally cutting edge. Like, there weren't universities. I'm assuming there weren't universities in Tasmania that were teaching.
They weren't really teaching that, and it was really new. Like, he was always, I think that's certainly why I'm in spatial computing and working with headsets and all that gizmos and gadgets, is that he loved the technology and he could always see what it could be. And his dream was to make websites that people could use for commerce, that they could sell their products through, or they could describe what they were doing. And he was just always looking at the latest tools and building a lot of stuff. We always had computers everywhere in various states of disassembly. And it was, just that really tech forward thinking. It was just everywhere.
And then did he allow you to play around with the computers and take them apart when you were a little kid? Do you think that had a lot to do with kind of how you and your brothers and sisters grew up?
Yeah, it really did, especially me and my older brother, who's like a year and a half older than me. He and I were very, very much kind of in lockstep for a long time. And when I was 6, Dad tried to teach me and my older brother Sam C++, actually it was.
When you were 6?
Yeah.
Did you pick it up really quickly? Because I always wonder about that. If you teach a child a language really early, it's typically easier than teaching an adult. But how did that go?
Didn't pick it up at all. Absolute failure. I was rubbish at it. I still remember object-oriented programming. I remember there being an illustration of it, of a guy on a ladder going up to a cloud. Still not sure exactly what it was trying to tell me, but going through that, it made me very interested in programming and what you could do with it. And so I started using BASIC or Dark Basic, which is like a very simple 3D games engine that I started using. That was kind of where I started messing with it. And that was much easier to do than C++. And it also allowed me to really quickly build games. So it was good. That's what made me initially want to do programming, because you kind of running around in DOS, like doing really long commands to copy a file. It was kind of felt fun. And then, building things was like the next level.
And you got to make cool video games, which kids are into. How long did it take you to make your first one when you were 11 years old?
There was one summer in particular where all day spent running around, because we were in a really, really nice part of Tassie, lots of hills, very green. There was a swamp nearby, so we could run around in there. We were playing all day outdoors, and then of a night time, I'd come back and spend all night, because I had my own little computer set up in a corner of Mum's art studio. So I would stay up all night with a blanket over my legs, just trying to stay warm, making games. So it was over that summer I started messing around with things. I worked on a few little projects. It was funny. I was talking about this just the other day to my wife, that everyone said they had a studio, all these like teenagers on these forums talking about the cool game studios they were doing. And there was some of the older ones going like, you don't have a studio, you're a kid on a computer. But it was kind of fun. You just mess around, you join other people's teams, you'd make a little game here and there. But the first one I did myself was probably like, it wasn't long. It'd be like a week, less than a week but it's mainly like bashing my head against a wall, trying to make things work, and eventually coming out with something that was fun, for me at least.
So you made that video game, and then what happened? What happened with that? What was the next step? Kind of, did you continue to make a bunch of different games after that? And then did that eventually lead you to visual design and art?
Yeah, so it was from that point I started to make slightly more complex games, but the thing that I really got into was 3D rendering. So there was this glorious period in the end of the 90s up to about 2003 where pixel shaders became a thing in video games, so that you could make surfaces look really, really detailed without actually the underlying detail have to change that much. And that there was this slate of game engines that people were putting out. There were these little indie ones, like people just making their little video game engine that no one used, up to like Doom, and like Doom 3 was this really amazing one that came out. And that was all of that engine tech. I loved it so much. And I would just go hunting for the most unique, like off the beaten path 3D engine that someone was building. I loved it. It was awesome. So I started to get into the rendering side of it, and then into 3D modeling. So I'd make characters for my games and for some other people's games. And that's where I really got stuck into 3D as modeling things, doing a render that looked really beautiful and making animations and stuff. So I kind of moved from the programming specifically more into the art side of games. And then from there, I got a job when I was 18. I got my first job as a 3D artist for a company that was doing construction modeling. So they would basically, an engineering company would get them to do the drafting and the rendering of things. And they got me in as a 3D artist to do really pretty renders of, in fact, the airport here in Launceston. I did the 3D fly through of that when they upgraded that in the early 2000s. So that was kind of like my first real job. And that was in 3D. And then from there, I was making a few other games. I got paid to make a game with my dad through one of his businesses, Web Village. They got asked to make a game, and then they got me in and this other guy, two other guys, to work on this game. And that was like my first games, like paid games job. And then after that, I kind of jumped from there to university, actually.
Very cool. And on the topic of these engines, these video game engines, the way it works is it's a platform, and then you can kind of add your own graphics and customize them to make something of your own. So gamers can tell sometimes what sort of engine is being used. So you'll play one game and it's the movements and the shadows are very similar to another, because the underlying platform that they're using is that very engine.
Yep. Yeah. So it's what powers, the difference between, say, Call of Duty and FIFA, like the latest FIFA game. You'll see that the light looks slightly different. You're exactly right, that the movement looks slightly different. And that's because at the lowest level, they're talking to their video card and the hardware in a slightly different way. Across those engines, some people have better performance in some areas and those kind of things. So it's fun trade-offs. But the one that really lit everything up was Doom 3 when that came out, because it had really, really nice lighting and hard shadows and everything. And everyone was just crazy about Doom 3.
That's really cool. And of course, a bunch of different video games were built on that platform. Did you start to think about how the interaction between the engineer and that final product and the platform itself, was that something that was always in the back of your mind? Because you seem like an aficionado of these engines. You kind of know which ones you like and which ones are great.
Yeah, it was the kind of where I like to sit in it was building tools and using tools. And this is the germ of JigSpace kind of started here, is that I like to build tools around that stuff so that other people could create. So I made a few games where there was a little level editor in it, so you could make your own levels for it. There was one little game I made called Do Something Beautiful, and it was just about moving through a level and leaving a little trail so it looked as cool as possible and making the coolest trail as you jump through. But you could just change, you could really easily go in there and just change what the level was like, and you could modify it yourself. So all those kind of little tools that's where I really like to play. And that was where Jig is very much come from that, giving people tools to create and share and communicate what they need to communicate in a really, really simple way. So it was definitely on my mind. I programmed up a little source control tool for myself where I could input code and it would send it up to a little server and tell me what had changed, all this stuff. Don't know why I did that, but it was essentially a text editor. And this was, again, I spent some time over a couple of summers doing this thing, but it was all about that tooling. There's certainly something in there.
Very cool. Sorry, what did you study in college?
English, literature, and history were the things that I tried. The first degree that I dropped out of. And then there was the first game design degree in Australia came up, and I'd been looking for something to do in games. I wanted to study in games, but there was nothing around at the time. But then this degree came up, so I moved from Tasmania to the mainland up to Brisbane, which is 2,000 kilometers north of here. And then I started studying game design. Didn't finish that degree either, because I got a job and dropped out.
What made you want to go into English Lit? Was it just the lack of this game design major, or was it something that you've always wanted to do, some creative work, or did you want to be an attorney?
It was two things. I was good at English and history. They were two, writing. I enjoyed that. And also I thought I can be a teacher because they've got really long holidays. And that was kind of the driving force behind being a teacher. But as soon as I got into it, I enjoyed the creative writing process. The history side it was fun, but then I was like, I want to make games. I just want to make games. I'm spending all my time making games and doing 3D modeling and rendering and stuff. I should be doing something in this. So when the opportunity came up, I dropped out.
Even when you went away from video game design to try to do something pragmatic, you were drawn back to it.
Oh yeah, it was the constant in my life has been making games, making 3D stuff. Even now, I've got little things spinning in the background that once every 6 months I do a little bit of code on. So it's always there.
And you worked in in the art world or in the design world, I would say, what was your first job out of college?
Making arcade games. So Dave and Buster's has some of my games in it still. So
Oh, wow.
it's yeah, yeah.
Any ones that we would know?
Speed of Light is the big one. It's like a big wall of buttons that you spam when they light up. You turn them off. And it's like, yeah, it was a very successful game. There was like a couple of videos of NFL teams that were using it for challenges when they were like creating content for their social channels and everything. So it kind of went. It was really good. It was like a very successful game. So that was one of the big ones that we worked on. And I also made a pinata game for kids where you could whack this kind of rubber base and it would knock around a pinata on the screen. It would actually dispense candy when you got to the end of a level. So yeah,
Oh, very cool.
wide range.
So you had all this experience designing video games. You're well versed in on the engineering side. You started learning to develop code when you were 6 years old. How did you come up with the idea, or what drew you eventually to creating JigSpace?
Yeah, so that after arcade games, I came back to Australia. I was in Jakarta at the time doing that. So I came back to Australia and wanted to teach game development. So there was a reason why, like, I wanted to go into teaching. It wasn't just the holidays. Like, I enjoy that. I enjoy communicating. There's something about when you can share passion about something with people, they get really excited by it, and that gives them the drive to do it themselves. And that's what, like, for me, that's always been critical, is seeing something that's got me really excited and then I'll dive into it. So I figured I wanted to kind of give that to students. And that I started doing that in distance education. So I had students all around Australia. And I'd also taught painting myself, because I do like art and painting and landscapes primarily. And I taught a bit of that and I really enjoyed it, like tutoring on that. So I thought if I could do that with games, that'd be sick. So we're teaching students all around Australia. If you know anything about distance education, engagement rates plummet after 3 weeks. If you don't get them in that first period of time, they drop off the map. And it's because they don't have a brick and mortar school to go into. They can't learn with their peers, because learning is for most people, it's a group activity. You learn just as much from seeing what other people are doing as you do by just the material yourself. And I kind of kicked off this project internally at this college, where we developed one of the world's first live teaching platforms in virtual reality. That tech had been kind of coming out. I'd been playing with it. I'd been doing a little bit of augmented reality stuff, but this virtual reality, like, we got the early Oculus headsets, send them out to students. We built this world where you could put on the headset, you're in this beautiful environment. Kind of looked a little bit like the one that I'd made, my first game that I'd made. I had like butterflies and blue skies. It looked kind of like ancient Greece, we modeled it after, but you could talk to your classmates. There was a teacher up the back with a big screen behind them with coursework on it, and you had your own virtual computer, we called a slate, that would come up and you could do your coursework. So it was just kind of connected to Google Drive, like Google Docs, and you could just type in and do stuff.
So virtual,
this incredible environment. Yeah.
And then with the students, obviously, they would have to have their own headsets, no matter where they were. But it kind of felt to them like they were in this virtual environment. Yeah,
so we did some early tests with it that were like, it was really, really engaging and it was really fun. But being there, being with someone else and being with other people, being able to talk to them was like this really powerful thing. But we're in this world where we could control anything we wanted. We had, like, it was the world that we'd created, but all of the information we were sharing was a PowerPoint or a PDF. It was flat 2D knowledge in a 3-dimensional world. And that stuck with me. Like, to create our course material, and we're teaching people 3D games. So we should be able to show people stuff in 3D. But to create any of our course content, we'd have to build a new platform. Like, you'd have to code it up yourself. You'd have to do all of this like development on it to just build one little course material, and it'd be a whole new project every time. So I took a Friday off and started prototyping what I thought would be a tool that would let me quickly create information or like knowledge content that we could share in 3D, like PowerPoint for 3D is what I was thinking. Step by step could take you through something. And the very first jig that I made was the little lack table from IKEA. It's just 4 legs and a tabletop, like the simplest thing they have. And I made the assembly procedure for that. And it was like a light bulb moment that we exist in 3 dimensions. Everything we understand about the world is in 3 dimensions, but all of our knowledge is in 2 dimensions. Everything that we share is on a piece of paper or on a screen. That stuck with me, and I knew the hardware was there, or it was coming. There would be a convergence of the software and hardware that allowed us to have something small enough, powerful enough, light enough that we could wear, that would bring 3D into our world. So you could look at anything and ask, how does that work? How do I fix that? What's that made of? You could ask questions about the world around you and get information right there in front of you in 3 dimensions. And that I could see that that was possible. I could just feel that all the pieces were somewhere there. It just needed to be built. And that was it. I was like, well, I want to build it. So here we are, 7 years later.
So did you leave your job then and decide, hey, I'm going to build this?
Yep.
And that was it?
Quit and just went straight into it. I got my co-founder on board because I'd been working with him. He was teaching games as well, but his background was in scientific visualization, engineering visualizations, like a graphics programmer. But he came on board. I showed him my terrible code and he wanted to make it a lot better. But yeah, we incorporated in the US. That was in 2015. We incorporated in the US at the start of 2016. We went through an accelerator there, Boost VC in San Mateo, which is Adam Draper's accelerator. It's like the frontier tech. They did a lot of VR, AR, crypto, jetpacks, like a lot of that kind of stuff. But yeah, we went through that, got a bit of money out of that. Like we ended up raising about $280,000 that year. And that was like massive for us. We'd never started a business before. I had no idea what we were doing, but we knew we had a lot to build. So we just focused on building an incredible product and like the technology that meant it was super easy to use. So there were just the 3 tenets that we built everything on. On day 2 of thinking about Jig, I wrote this at the top, was that everything must be simple, useful, and delightful. Those are the 3 things it has to be for it to get the adoption that I want it to be. If I want it to be the standard for how people share knowledge in 3 dimensions, it has to be those things. So it's kind of, that's been one of our guiding axioms since day 1.
How long did it take you to make version 1.0, that minimally viable product?
Probably at end of 2017. So Apple released AR Kit in 2017, like midway through the year, they announced it. And then with the iPhone 10, they launched it. So that was where we launched our first version, was the end of 2017. And it was featured on day 1 and has been featured every week since then. There's like 5 million downloads, 4.8 out of 5-star rating worldwide from like 35,000 like 5-star ratings. It's like people love the app, and it got really big in schools. So students and teachers using it, and then businesses started to see it. And I'm like, there's a jet turbine in here, which kind of looks like the complex thing we manufacture, and we struggle to communicate its value, or it's a challenge to do that. They started to reach out to us and say, do you sell the tool? Do you have a way for us to create it? And so then we released the creation tool for other people to use, which is in 2019. And then we're in the 2020, the iPhone keynote. That was a massive, massive moment. And
that's amazing. So 2017, you had your first version, your first kind of product. People were downloading it. Businesses took note. And then 2020, you were part of the Apple Keynote, which must have been amazing.
It's like the Super Bowl. It's like the thing that you hope to get in as a developer on the iOS ecosystem. It's the biggest thing you can do. And we had like a 30-second spot in that. So it was a huge segment.
That's massive.
And it showed, it's huge. And it showed our work with Medtronic, largest medical tech company in the world, who we were working with. We didn't really have anything to sell at that point. So it was really hard to charge people. So we were just kind of making it up as we went. But then after that, in that keynote, we showed them laying out their facilities using Jig, and that was like a 90% time and cost reduction doing that, because something that would take weeks was taking hours.
And so just to back up a little bit, by 2020, how many employees did you have by the time you got into the Apple keynote?
10.
You had 10 employees by then, and you'd already raised your Series A, your $6 million Series A round?
No, so that was right after. So in 2021, we raised off the back of the Apple keynote, essentially. And that was 4.7 US. So it ended up being 6 million Australian, but 4.7 US. So it was, yeah, that was really big to have that validation from Apple, and for them to say, this isn't just a tool for education and interesting things, but for students and teachers, it's actually businesses can use it too and get massive value from it. And then in 2022, started 2022, we commercialized it and put out our official, you can now buy Jig. And we were very product led. Everything was organic inbound, like right up until a couple of months ago, everything's just been organic inbound.
Is there a particular industry that finds that you find uses Jig more than others?
So it's within, if you think about the timeline that we're on, eventually, and it's not too far away, everyone will be using spatial computing. By too far, I mean like 5 years away. Everyone will just use it as the de facto platform for communication. So we'll be having this conversation, but you'll be here in the room in some way, and it'll be much more natural than looking at a flat surface. The companies that can use that tech now have CAD files. They've got 3D files of their products already, because that's the biggest challenge, is how do we can get 3D into the world pretty easily now, but how do we get the world into 3D? That's the big challenge. CAD files, since the 80s, almost every product is manufactured with a 3D file that it starts its life there. So that's what our customers use, which means that manufacturing, durable manufacturing, so automotive, life sciences, oil and gas industry, those big industries that have large, complex, technical, expensive products, that's where we fit.
And do these companies typically use JigSpace for training? Is it for sales? Is it for a number of things? What are they using the software for?
Anywhere that communication is critical to the success of a product. So it is sales. They can cut down sales time by like the sales cycle. There's like a 75% reduction in the time it takes to sell something when you can show them what it's like in situ, especially when it's something big like a medical lab robotics. So it works really well in sales. In marketing, the Alfa Romeo F1 team, who I have a lot of merch from, they are one of our partners, but they launched their cars in augmented reality each year, and the special liveries they do for fan engagement. So they get they've had within 24 hours of their car launch, 500,000 views, and not just people viewing it, but that's a minute spent looking at it. The average Instagram video is like 5 to 8 seconds of engagement. This is a minute looking at their product, which is astronomical. And then in training, so companies that need to train on a process that is fundamentally three-dimensional, you've got to go around to the back of this thing and make sure you do this correctly, or it's some kind of assembly process. Anything where it's complex and hard to explain, we make that much easier.
That's amazing. So whether it's sales, marketing, or training, you can make a huge difference by using JigSpace.
Massive difference.
How do people interact with JigSpace? How do they create models? Do you have to be a technical professional to do it? Or what is the interaction like?
It's like I said earlier, the guiding principles, like the first axiom, I love axioms, we've got 4 of them, but the first one is everything must be simple, useful, and delightful. So throughout the entire experience, it is really easy for you to download it. You just go to the website, or it's on the App Store. It's on like iPhone, iPad, and desktop. You just download that, create an account, and from there, you can if you've got a CAD file, you just select it, does all of the work in the background to process it, to get it ready. Because it is, like, CAD files are huge. They are super complex. It's made for manufacturing. So they're super high resolution. There's no way they're going to run on a phone or on a device just by themselves. So we process it all in the background, but you don't have to think about it. As a user, you select it, spins for a bit, and then your 3D model is there. Your CAD file is ready to go. The tool itself is incredibly simple to use. It kind of gets out of your way and only gives you the tools you need. So it's got a very common, like, it's step by step. So you create a new step, you do something on it, make another one, do something on it, and we handle all the animation between it. You can add video, audio, text, all of those things to it, and you just hit save, and it's available immediately anywhere on any device with no app. So it's designed to be easy to create, easy to share, and accessible everywhere. And you don't need to be technical. We have a lot of non-technical users that are the creators.
And how much does it cost to be one of these users, to be able to create?
So we've got a free tier. There is a free, like, demo tier where you can play around with it and you can use it. We also have our starter licenses for, like, smaller organizations. That's about $2,500 a year. And then it goes up to, like, organization and enterprise tiers after that. And we've got customers ranging from 1 to 2 person shops that are building, like, little agencies that are building things, all the way up to Panasonic, PepsiCo, Thermo Fisher, Medtronic, like, massive companies that are using it. So it's kind of like this big spread of people that are using it, but it's meant to be accessible and useful for a single person right down at the end of the chain who's using it. They love using it and they get something quickly useful out of it, all the way up to an organization who can then have it throughout their org as the way that they communicate internally and externally.
How many customers do you currently have?
We have almost 100 customers now.
100 paying customers.
Yep.
Very cool. And are most of your customers, where are they based? Are they based in Australia? Is it Europe? Is it the US?
It's US or North America and Europe primarily, and then kind of everywhere else comes third.
Awesome. So what's next for JigSpace? What are you working on now? What are some of the challenges that you're facing as you grow, as you expand? Is it focusing on a particular industry? Is it perfecting the product? Is it something maybe I'm not discussing?
So there's a few really cool things happening at a broader level. I think 2 of the big ones are generative AI. Love it. It's everywhere, and it does open up a lot for people in terms of assets, which, like I said, was the biggest challenge. Like, how do you get the right things together to make something useful? And the other one is spatial computing. So the Vision Pro keynote that happened in June, we were in that keynote as well. We've actually been in 4 Apple keynotes now. But this last one with the Vision Pro was massive, because this, you could see in 2017 when Apple said, here's AR kit. This is the augmented reality kit that you can now use on phones. It was coming. This moment was going to come along where they released their own hardware for it. And so we've basically been preparing for that. We've been building for spatial computing for a long time. So now that launches early next year, we'll be there. Day one, we'll be on the platform, and that's like a huge, huge moment. So we're very, very excited about that. The other one with the AI piece, we just announced the other day, JigSpark, which is a tool that lets you bring a CAD file and a link to the product's website, and it will generate the entire jig for you. So if you want a sales jig, it'll say, here are all the key features of the product. It'll pull it apart. It'll show all the pieces. It'll make the whole thing for you. So you get like a sales or marketing or training presentation out the back of it in seconds. That kind of thing is really exciting to me as well. Like, how do we get a user to value that's something that's valuable to them, their CAD file, get there as fast as possible to something they can use, or it can be a base for something they can build on. So that's a really interesting thing that we're working on now as well.
So it's keeping up with the latest technologies and also continuing to make your product as user-centric, as easy to use, as
Yep.
easy to access as possible.
That's it. It is all about that simplicity and utility and delight for our customers. It has to be, because the only way, there's plenty of tools out there that are difficult to use, they're expensive, and it takes a lot of time to see that value. But we've gone hard the other way and said that the tool and the use for the person using it is critical. They've got to get there fast.
That, I think, statement indicates why you are in the Apple Keynote. It's not about the technology. It's not necessarily just for engineers and technical professionals. It's for the end user, and that end user can be anyone, whether it's a small single person organization or a massive one like Panasonic, Medtronic. Zac, how can people learn more about JigSpace?
Head to the website, jig.space. I think we've got jigspace.com as well. But yeah, just go check out the website. You can download the app, have a look around. You'll see us more and more as the Apple Vision Pro launches. Yeah, we're everywhere. Download the app. It's free.
Very cool. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to chat with me. I really enjoyed doing this interview. I hope you enjoyed being a part of it. Really cool story. So thank you so much. And folks at home, of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, head to jig.space, download that app for free.